Amidst the vast, sun-scorched expanse of northeastern Africa lies Sudan, a nation of staggering beauty, yet burdened by an unrelenting tide of war. Its rivers once nourished civilizations, its soil bore the weight of empires, yet its people have known little but strife. For generations, the spectre of conflict has cast its long and terrible shadow, leaving behind not merely ruins of stone, but ruins of the human soul. A nation fractured. To understand Sudan's plight, one must trace the lines of history, lines drawn not by the will of its people, but by conquerors who sought dominion over a land they scarcely understood. Sudan, standing at the crossroads of Arab and African worlds, is a land of many tongues, faiths, and traditions. Yet instead of unity, this diversity was weaponized, first by colonial masters and then by those who inherited their legacy of division. The wounds of foreign rule did not heal. Rather, they festered, erupting into a ceaseless cycle of war and ruin. The Second Sudanese Civil War, a nation at war with itself. Of all the conflicts that have ravaged this land, none was so protracted, so merciless, as the Second Sudanese Civil War. For more than 2 decades, the Arab-dominated government in Khartoum waged war upon the south, a land of Christians and animists who had long suffered under its rule. At stake was not merely governance, but identity, faith, and the wealth buried deep within the earth. Oil, a prize for which blood was spilled without remorse. Villages burned, families were scattered to the wind, and those who survived did so not by the mercy of men, but by sheer fate. Snatched from their homes, children were conscripted into war or left to the vultures of famine and disease. The world watched, distracted by conflicts elsewhere, and Sudan bled on. The illusion of peace. In 2005, a fragile peace emerged, though it was not peace in the true sense, merely a pause, a breath before the next storm. The comprehensive peace agreement offered promises of power sharing and self-determination, yet suspicion festered beneath the surface. When South Sudan cast its decisive vote for independence in 2011, the world hailed it as a victory, yet in truth it was merely the birth of another tragedy. Independence did not bring harmony, but new lines of dispute. Oil, borders, and old wounds reopened with fresh grievances, and soon the fledgling South Sudan fell into its own abyss of war. Darfur, the forgotten genocide. Even as the world's eyes turned southward, another horror unfolded in the west. In 2003, Darfur became the stage for yet another atrocity, one so heinous, so methodical in its cruelty, that the very word genocide was uttered in hushed tones. The Sudanese government, unwilling to tolerate defiance, loosed the Janjaweed upon its own people. These riders of death swept through the land, leaving behind only smoke and bones. Villages were erased from the earth, their inhabitants slaughtered or driven into exile. The desert itself became a graveyard. Condemnation came, but it was hollow, too late to halt the tide of blood. Arrest warrants were issued, sanctions imposed, yet the guilty walked free, and the suffering of Darfur's people remained but a footnote in the annals of history. The rise of the rapid support forces, from raiders to rulers. From the smoldering remains of Darfur, a new power arose. The Janjaweed, once a mere band of raiders, were given structure, arms, and purpose. They became the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, a paramilitary force no longer lurking in the shadows, but standing at the very heart of Sudan's military and political landscape. Their rise was swift and brutal. No longer just enforcers of Khartoum's will, they became kingmakers in their own right, feared by enemies and allies alike. With the fall of Sudanese leader Omar al-Bashir in 2019, the RSF seized its moment. In the chaos that followed, they did not fade into obscurity, but tightened their grip, carving out a place for themselves in Sudan's fragile power structure. Their leader, General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hemeti, became one of the most powerful men in the country. Once a mere camel trader, now a warlord with ambitions that stretched beyond Sudan's borders. The RSF did not merely exist alongside Sudan's military, they rivaled it. Tensions between the RSF and the Sudanese armed forces boiled beneath the surface, threatening to erupt at any moment. When the inevitable clash came in 2023, Sudan found itself once again descending into violence. This time, not as a war between North and South, nor between government and rebels, but between two factions fighting for dominance. The streets of Khartoum became battlegrounds, and the people of Sudan once more bore the brunt of warlords' ambitions. The conflict was not about ideology or justice. It was about power, brutal, unrelenting power. Sudan, already battered by decades of war, was now caught in the grip of those who saw it not as a nation, but as a prize to be won. A land trapped in its past. And so the cycle continues, a land of immeasurable beauty, shackled by the ghosts of its history, a people who have known nothing but struggle, their hopes crushed beneath the weight of endless war. Sudan stands at a crossroads, but it has stood there before. Time and again it has teetered on the edge of a brighter future, only to be pulled back into the abyss by the hands of those who see war as a means, not an end. The world, as it has so often done, watches in silence. Statements of concern are issued, resolutions passed, yet no hand is truly extended. Sudan's suffering becomes another tragedy in the long list of conflicts that were deemed too distant, too complicated, too inconvenient to solve. But Sudan is not merely a battlefield. It is a land of poets and warriors, of merchants and farmers, of dreamers who still dare to hope. Though the past has written its verses in blood, the future remains unwritten. And perhaps one day, the people of Sudan will seize the pen for themselves. But only Allah, the Almighty, knows what is to come. In His wisdom, He holds the fate of nations and the destiny of men, and it is to Him alone that the oppressed turn in their darkest hour.